Hi, I'm Sam Kaufman with the Human Path and Herbal Medics Academy. And today I want to spend a little bit of time in the apothecary making some Lactucarium. This is a concentrated version of the sap that we find inside of the plant called prickly lettuce. Some people call it wild lettuce, prickly lettuce, opium lettuce. It's called that because of its opioid type effects. Being very pain relieving and analgesic. It's not an opioid, but it does have similar effects. It's very soporific. It helps people sleep very well. It induces lucid dreaming. It is probably, there's some different constituents in it that have a lot of different effects. One of them is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. It's called lactucopikrin, which means that, which probably has something to do with the lucid dreaming there. Maybe useful for glaucoma. I find actually that lactuca, I've used it for teenage acne and it's very well. And I don't know if it's because it's related to anxiety and stress, but I've had good effects with it using it in formulas for that. But primarily, it's what we would call an anxiolytic. So for high anxiety, for PTSD, for irritation, for, on the mental level, on the stress side, but also on the physical level, for physical pain. It's not really one of those that you just feel the pain necessarily go away, but it's more like you just, even if you notice the pain, it doesn't really bother you. At least that's my own personal effect, and that's what how a lot of people describe it who use it. Now, you can, of course, make medicine out of this plant in the standard ways of tincture and glycerites and all that kind of thing. But we can also really concentrate down that lactucarium into a very concentrated sort of a black, if you do it right, it's kind of a black mass that can be this sort of tarry in substance. You can dry it out even more than that, but tarry is usually how I would describe it. And this can then reabsorb back into different solvents, and I'll explain that too. But first thing we need to do is pull it out. Now, you can do this with the fresh plant or you can do this with the dried plant, but you're going to get better results if you do it with a dried plant, is my experience. And you can do it with just water. So there's people out there showing you just to take the plant and boil it in water, basically, and boil it all down and get that. And I do that. We've done that. In fact, we just did that in our Wilderness Herbal First Responder class in Colorado. We used the fresh plant and boiled it down. And that's good. It works. But you can get a lot better quality if you use a dried plant. You can get a lot better quality if you use alcohol in there in a measured amount to be able to pull out some of the different constituents that are not so water soluble, while many of them are also water soluble. And so we'll go through that and talk about that. I want to demonstrate this, and we'll actually measure how much we're working with and what we end up with, and that'll give you an idea of how concentrated this is. The first thing I want to do is let's weigh the herb that we're using. Now we're using dried herb. This is dried lactuca, dried wild lettuce. Cut and sifted. This is all the aerial parts. I cut it off. What I do when I harvest it is I cut it off at the base, about the ground level, and I do that right about the time that it's getting ready to flower, and then I use that. So we have the dried herb here, and let's weigh it, and let's pick some easy round numbers. So let's just weigh out 100 grams of lactuca. Now, what are we going to use as our solvent to put this in? We're going to decoct it, not just in water, as I mentioned before, but let's decoct it in water and alcohol. So about a 50%, a little less than 50%. So I use organic alcohol, organic sugarcane alcohol, which is 90% alcohol actually. So half and half is really closer to around 40 to 45% alcohol by volume is what we're really working with here. So put the alcohol and the water together in a pan now, and we're going to decoct that down. The word decoct, basically what we're doing is we are simmering now, not boiling, but simmering it down to the point where we have removed most of the water, and that water that we have left in there is very, very concentrated, very concentrated. Another thing we can consider even doing is picking up the condensation, or distilling and recondensing as we go. It takes longer to do that, but I'll show you a few examples of that. You can put a lid on there that catches everything, or you can turn the lid upside down, or you can take another pan and put it in there inside a pan and put some ice cubes in there, and that'll condense. But the problem is you're going to need that steam still to come off because you're still decocting down. You want to lose the water eventually, but you're just recondensing and recondensing because there are a lot of constituents in this. A lot of compounds in this plant that are water soluble that will come out in the steam. I promise you that. If you sit and you just inhale the steam, in fact, this happens to me, messing around with it, if I breathe too much steam in, you will definitely feel an effect from it. So we're gonna do that, and then what we're gonna do when we get down to the point where we have boiled it down or simmered it down to where there's not much left in there, there's maybe a couple hundred milliliters of water left in there, then we're going to go ahead and strain it. Now, what I did is I started with 500 milliliters of alcohol and 500 milliliters of water. So that's 1,000 mils. So 1,000 mils of solvent and 100 grams. What that is that's a 1 to 10. So we have 100 is 1/10 of 1,000, right? So we have a 1 to 10 ratio there. So that would be, if we were talking about ratios, this would be a 1 to 10 right now. It's going to even be bigger than that when we get done. Okay, so now we've done that, and what I like to do now is like to take this what's left, what we call the marc. It's spelled M-A-R-C. That's the marc that's left over after we strain the herb, and I'm going to put this into a percolation funnel. Now, what I like to use for something like this is just what I call a rinse. I don't worry about in a percolation funnel. Normally, you worry about your drip rate, and you actually control the flow of the alcohol speed through your percolation. But for this, I just use a rinse. So I use what I call I use the Chemex glass coffee filters. I really like those, and I percolate through that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to percolate another 500 mils of ethanol, another 500 mils of our organic sugarcane alcohol through this. Okay, now when I get done with that and press everything through that, I'm going to take that and I am going to take my marc and I'm going to put that all back into a pan, and I'm going to add in another 500 milliliters of water. So we have another 1,000, right? 50-50, 1,000, 45% alcohol in there. And I'm going to do the same thing one more time. So we've really done a double decoction with a percolation in the center there. Okay, so then when we get done with that, really what we could say is this is a now we've, instead of just being a 1 to 10, instead of 100 grams to 1,000 milliliters, it was actually 100 grams to 2,000 milliliters. So it's really a 1 to 20 ratio that we really started out at here. Okay. Now, when we get done with this, or when just for the hell of it, let's take a look at this. And we've got when we get down to 100 milliliters left of our decoction. So we've boiled off everything else. We've steamed it off. We've even done some condensation in there just for fun. You don't have to do that part of it, but I just wanted to show you that that's one thing you can do to even concentrate it more. The problem is it takes a lot longer because you're letting out less steam, over time. And we've simmered that all the way down to where we have 100 milliliters left. This is a very, very thick fluid there's going to be mostly water, because most of the alcohol evaporates off a little faster than the water does, right? So this is mostly water. So this would not be shelf stable by itself. We'd have to add alcohol to it in order to make it shelf stable, or glycerin, or whatever we're going to do for that. But it's pretty concentrated. I just wanted to show you this. This would be a 20 to 1, right? So we have 2,000 milliliters, and we have concentrated that down to 100 milliliters of solvent. So really, when we're done here, we've got a 20 to 1. This is a 20 to 1 mixture decoction that we're looking at right now. Okay, but we're going to go farther than this, because what we really want is we want the lactucarium, which is really a solid when we're done. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to take this what we have left, this really concentrated, very concentrated decoction, and I need to get this down to where we've got really almost no fluid left at all in here. Okay, where it starts to become very solid. You can do this a couple of ways. What I like to do at this point is to double boil it, because I don't want to just have it on direct heat. It gets a little bit it's a little touch and go. If you add too much heat, you end up kind of burning it. So we're going to double boil it here. So the way that we double boil is we take our remaining 100 milliliters or so of our final decoction, and we put that into a pan, and we put that pan into another pan of water, and we boil that, so we're putting in a double boiler essentially. That way we're not getting any of the heat directly onto that, the heat directly into that, and risking burning it. And as it starts to thicken up, what I'll do then at one point, once it's just kind of a sludge, is I'll take it, and actually you can do a bunch of things. You could put it in the oven and just cook it that way at about, now you don't want to get it above about 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, 220 Fahrenheit, in that range. Don't take it much higher than that, because if you do, you might destroy that lactucopicrin, which we want. We want that. I mentioned that earlier. It's our acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, and it's mostly alcohol soluble, and we want to take care of that and make sure that stays in there. And there's some other constituents in there, probably, arguably as well, that we might destroy with too much heat. So if you're going to bake it, keep it under about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Maybe 210 is fine, but not much higher than that. But what I'll do is I'll actually take it out and put it in the sun. And since we're in San Antonio, Texas here, there's plenty of sun, so and plenty of heat, especially this time of year. So I can take it out and it dries out really quickly in the sun, like within a couple of hours. And the sun, the UV is going to be fine. It doesn't destroy, it doesn't hurt anything. I've never had a problem with that. It's fine. And then once it starts to get really thick into this sludge and hardens up, you can then at that point it's ready to, I mean, it's pretty much dry, but you can bring it inside and it'll still dry a little bit more. You could put it in a food dehydrator as well, and you can really try to dry it out as much as you can to get it to the point where you can actually powder it. I've never gotten it that dry. I've never tried, but you probably could do that and powder it up too. So if you wanted to do that right now, it's very resinous, kind of thick, tarry mass, right? What does that actually weigh? Let's go with our ratio and go back. We weigh this, it weighs 9 grams. So almost 10 grams. So by weight, that is about, we are at about a 10 to 1. We've done a 10 to 1 concentration here because we started with 100 grams of herb to beginning with, and now we've got 9 grams left. So a little less, a little greater than a 10 to 1 ratio of a concentrate that we've created here, okay? This is a very, very potent. This is extremely potent. I mean, I was handling it a little bit and got some on my fingers. And I inhaled a little bit of steam yesterday, and I had to take a nap. I slept last night for like 10 hours straight. I had the most incredible lucid dreams. It's amazing. This plant is really a very potent and a very powerful plant, even though we consider it just to be a weed and a roadside weed. It's a very powerful medicinal. So we have that. Now, how do we re-dilute this plant? Well, we can put it back into the same solvent type of mixture that we pulled out, and that was around a 45. I prefer actually more like a 35 to 45% alcohol percentage. So let me show you. If we put it into pure alcohol, and the reason I say this is because I know a lot of herbalists out there who prefer to extract this at a high alcohol percentage, and I've always said, a lot of these lactucarium and a lot of the other very important constituents in this plant are really not alcohol soluble at all. They're much more water soluble. So I've always done it at a lower percentage just to do like tinctures of, percolation or maceration tinctures or whatever. I've always used about a 35% alcohol. So let me show you the difference between 90% alcohol. You can see this on the spoon. It doesn't come off at all. It stays right there. I'm going to go ahead and dilute that down with a pre-measured amount of water, and it brings it down to about 35% alcohol. And you can see how immediately it starts changing color, starts coming off the spoon. And this has been sitting here for about 12 hours, so it's kind of hardened onto that metal. It's coming right off. So this is how we can re-dilute it into a liquid form if we need to do that. Again, there are other ways we can take it besides liquid form, but that is probably the easiest way to dose it. Then you can take a certain amount, you can dilute it back. We know we had a 10 to 1 ratio on that 100 grams, right? So that means for every 1 gram of this that we were to dilute, it would be the equivalent actually of 10 grams of the dried herb. So bear that in mind when you re-dilute it. Okay, so this is the best way that I know of to get the lactucarium out and to then be able to reuse it. And it's also such a convenient way to be able to carry it around or to store it. Okay, that is everything I had to show you about Lactucarium, and hopefully that was useful. Note that this is something that you could take with you in the field, and it would be very small amount, right? It doesn't weigh very much. It's going to weigh less than a tincture. You don't have to worry about bottling it. It keeps just fine. It's very shelf stable. And then you could dilute it back into other substances or take it even in other ways. There's many different ways you could consider taking this. You could consider, if you had it at home, you could nebulize it and inhale it that way. You could steam it, and it would probably be okay. I mean, you get something out of the steam. You could smoke it, but the problem is that you would probably destroy some of those constituents with the high heat of smoking it. You could put it in between. You could put it sublingually or subbuccal, or between the buccal, between the cheek and the gum, and let it absorb sublingually that way, or absorb directly into the bloodstream that way. Of course, you can take it orally, like you would take any kind of oral herbal medicine, and inside of the nasal membrane. Even there's a lot of different ways we could administer this directly to the bloodstream or through the gut and into the bloodstream eventually as well. And all of those work. They're all effective. Some more effective than others. But this is, again, a very effective way to have a very strong and transportable, easily portable, pain-relieving substance that you could pack with you, for instance, in a first aid kit for, wilderness medicine or for post-disaster or austere medicine to have along, and then just dilute it from there. If you like this video, please click like, or if you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you please subscribe, all that stuff. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out at thehumanpath.com or herbalmedics.academy. And then if you like this kind of stuff, we do this all the time at our school, right? We have an austere medicine hands-on 5-day coming up, be taught by myself and Dr. Steve Pearson, MD. He's a trauma. Both of us are former Special Forces medics. He went one direction medicine. I kind of went a different way, and we're putting all of that together in the field. So you're learning everything from suturing and debridement and gunshot wound, taking care of gunshot wounds and wound packing. And on the other side, you're making lactucarium, and you're making charcoal, and you're making poultices, and you're making some crazy medicines to be able to use in the field that are sustainable medicines that you run out of. You don't have pharmaceuticals. What do you do? How do you do? We put all that together. So check that out also at herbalmedics.academy. You'll see that coming up in October, along with our combat medic course and our tactical medicine course and wilderness first aid certification. We have tons of these kinds of classes going on. So check us out. Thanks. Bye.